It's Mike Unleashed on the BetRivers Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for Mike Unleashed. A little earlier on the Mike Missanelli podcast, brought to us by BetRivers. I mentioned something that I think would be a little tweak to these press conferences that would get more information for the fan. And here's how I would do it. Now, I didn't really see the room when I watched that press conference. I don't know how many reporters were there, but I would assume that it was 30 plus. And there are all these little blogs and websites and things like that. And everybody in the world has an Eagle account that covers the Eagles. I don't know who gets credentialed, but there were a lot of people in that room that were barking questions. And it was mayhem because one guy was trying to talk over the other to get noticed, so he would be chosen to ask the question. So here's the way I would do it. I would have one designated reporter. And this reporter would be selected based on merit, based on his seniority, based on his respect within the press ranks. And I would have everybody else write down a question that they would give to this one guy who would have his own question. And then I would have one other reporter there as my follow-up guy. So in other words, if you want a question asked, you don't have to shout it out. It's already down on a paper, and the person that you select, the designated reporter, would ask the question. And then the guy who's the second would be responsible for following up the question. And this way you wouldn't have mayhem. Now, would the Eagles agree to something like that? No. But if the press corps was united enough, they could pull it off. They could say, hey, listen, this is the way we're going to conduct the press conference. It shouldn't matter to you because you're going to get the same questions that would be asked just by people shouting it out. But we're going to have a decorum and we're going to have order. And with decorum and order comes better answers. Because the second guy, who is the second to the pool reporter who has been designated, would then be responsible for hearing the answer and then following up on that answer. And that is the only way you're going to get true information. I think it's a brilliant suggestion. I know a lot of people go, Mike, you're crazy. It's another one of your crazy Missanelli ideas. Tell me why that's crazy. Darren?
Wouldn't there be too many egos in the press room to allow that?
Well, that's why you got to be united. What is the most important thing in this business? To get the information to the people, right? Okay. So even if you say, okay, this question was submitted by Joe Blow of Crossing Green or whatever the website is, right? And then you ask the question. And the guy from Crossing Green goes, okay, that's my question, right? He's going to get stamped with it. And so you ask the question, and then the answer comes back, and it's convoluted, like his answer on the linebackers. The second guy would then be responsible for going, Howie, really, are you telling us that you have not shortchanged that position? Because it sure looks like that you don't put a priority on it. Now, did we get that follow-up question? After he gave you the BS about Nakobe Dean and Zach Cunningham, where did the conversation go? It evaporated into thin air.
Yeah, I think the plan's fantastic. I really do.
All right, so there you go. Press corps, if you're listening to the podcast, and you should be, because you can pick up some things. Like, just say that Tim McManus, who is a very respected guy, he's our buddy, or Jeff McClain. McClain's been covering the beat longer than anybody, right? He's the one guy that usually holds the Eagles' feet to the fire. So he gets the honor, and then in the next press conference, you switch it up, and you vote depending on who is the most respected in there, who has the most seniority. You can act like adults and get that done, can't you?
I think so. Bark.
All right. Bark it. Okay. So in other words, after he says, he was asked the question, well, when you look at what happened this past year, what gives you the confidence in bringing Nick back for another season? And he says, well, I mean, I look at his record, and our record was like, he put a number out there, like 25-11 or 35-11 prior to that meltdown. No, 26-5 in our previous 31 is what he said. And then the second guy, to the guy who asked that question, then says, well, yeah, but you also lost to historic proportions, and it looked like the team disintegrated under his watch. What is your thoughts on that? And this way you get because we didn't get the follow up to that. Howie Roseman was allowed to say what he said. Well, here's why we're bringing it back, because we were 26-5 in the previous 31, and he made the playoffs 3 years in a row, and not many coaches do that. And it went nowhere. That was his final answer. And that's what I'm saying. In a follow-up situation, in this structured press conference that I'm suggesting, that second guy would then be responsible for saying, well, yeah, but. You see what I'm going with that? All right. Let's move on. Mike Unleashed. What is going on with airlines these days? I am reading more contention with people on airplanes. And I don't understand. Like, what is it that's making people melt down so much on airlines? There's always somebody who's causing a ruckus that has to be taken off of an airplane, or you have to taxi back to the gate. The latest story I read yesterday, this was a flight that was going from a Texas city to a Texas city, I think, American Airlines. And a man on the airlines was taken off the flight for excessive farting. Now, I can't make this stuff up. What kind of a slob would pass gas on an airplane? Now, I know that probably people out there saying, well, I've done that. I've snuck one out. There is nothing more repulsive than sitting next to somebody who does that. Darren, has that ever happened to you? First of all, have you ever passed gas on an airplane?
No, I haven't. But I'll tell you, when we were flying back from Disney World, there was a guy in front of us who was passed out, and he was half the flight. I wanted to strangle him.
He was doing what? Farting?
Yeah, and he was right in front of us. I wanted to strangle the guy.
I got to be honest. That is grounds for being taken off an airplane. If you can't control yourself to the point you're going to make everybody uncomfortable with your smelly gas, I mean, that's repulsive. The worst thing that ever happened to me on an airline when I was working in newspapers, I was flying all over the place every week, 3 times a week almost. A woman in the middle seat, and I had the aisle seat, changed her baby's diaper on the food tray. As she sat next, seriously, now, who would do something like? Do you have any regard for anybody else? That's not a thing you should do. Now, I don't think you're allowed to do that anymore. I think they put in regulations and they put in the changing tables in the back or whatever. But this woman thought it was no big deal to change her baby's diaper in front of me. All right. Let's move on. Luka Doncic. There's something emotionally wrong with this guy. I've never seen a great player complain as much as this guy does about officiating. And last night in the Dallas Mavericks game, he got 2 technicals, got thrown out for complaining. But he also had a fan ejected from a fan who was wearing a Phoenix Suns jersey, who was kind of heckling Luka the whole night. And the game was in Dallas. So it was a rogue fan who was a Phoenix Suns fan who said the following to Luka. Hey, Luka, you're tired. Get your ass on the treadmill. Now, if you look at Luka Doncic, he does look a little heavy. He doesn't look like he's in the greatest shape, but he performs every night. So I guess it's not a worry that he's not cut. So that's what the fan said, and that's when he wigged out at the fan. And he got the director of security at that arena in Dallas to eject the fan. And I started thinking about it, and I go, what right does a player have to eject a fan? Like, at the very least, I hope that the Dallas Mavericks gave that guy his money back. Now, I'm not a guy who would ever yell anything. I never have been, even before I got into this business, to heckle a player. I think it's juvenile. I think that if you do something like that, you really don't have a lot going on in your life. But the guy said, get on the treadmill, which is, a common refrain for Luka. Everybody looks at him and says, man, he looks like he's out of shape and heavy. So Luka has the right. So in other words, that sets a precedent. Any player who is annoyed with somebody can actually eject a paying customer from the arena. Is that the way it should work, Darren?
Never in a million years does a player have that right.
All right, now, if the guy is yelling racial slurs or really going below the belt, then security has the responsibility to eject the guy. But I don't think a player should have the ability to eject somebody from the stadium. Now, it happens in baseball a lot. There are a lot of baseball players that get fans ejected. And I think a Philly did it last year. Didn't Bryce Harper do it? Or somebody did it. In any event,
Harper would do that. As long as the fan is yelling something benign, that comes with the cost of the ticket, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, you should have rabbit ears. Listen, I know these guys are human. They hear things. But you shouldn't hear things. You got to be above it. For Christ's sake, you're making $60 million a year. Some guy who's trying to scrape together nickels to buy a ticket to the game is saying you need to go on a treadmill and you wig out. Put things in perspective, Luka. He really needs an attitude adjustment, that dude. All right, and finally, bye-bye to SI. Man, I'll tell you, Sports Illustrated and newspapers were the reason why I got into this business in the first place. And I think I've said that many times before. And the covers that they had were iconic. Of course, the swimsuit issue was a big appeal to younger kids growing up and, even kids in their 20s and even guys that are in the 60s. But in any event, I used to love the prose, prose, that was written in Sports Illustrated. It was always a button-down magazine, and you really learned to write by reading. And I was a vociferous reader of Sports Illustrated to the point where my mom made sure that she renewed my subscription. When I was a kid, she renewed my subscription every year. And, we didn't have a lot of money either, but she knew that was important to me. She saw my stuff that I was buried in those magazines and buried reading newspapers. And she always renewed my Sports Illustrated subscription. And now it's gone. And it's the death of journalism, really. And, rather than get annoyed by it, it's inevitable. I try to sit back and go, okay, the business has changed. And so every great institution has to fall. And first of all, it was the great newspapers that carried the day. And then it was magazines. And now it's Sports Illustrated, who tried desperately to hold on by going digital and doing different things. And this new company that bought them just zipped them. And in fact, in the LA Times just laid off 100 people. It's a really tough time for people who were really invested in this profession. So for all the people that ever wrote for Sports Illustrated, I can tick them off: Frank DeFord, Franz Lids, all these great names, Steve Rushin, all these guys that I go, man, these guys are great writers. I want to be like those guys one day. That was from Sports Illustrated. All right. Let's close this out. We're not going to do 3 questions today because Darren doesn't have the voice to do 3 questions. I should have asked 3 questions of myself, but I was caught off guard. But my thought of the day is sometimes my thoughts are silly and sometimes they're pertinent. This is a silly thought. But I kind of resent all the references we have today to AI, which is artificial intelligence. It has occurred to me that our frequent use of the letters AI, referring to artificial intelligence, dilutes the legacy of our own AI in this city. When people say AI anymore, the first thing you normally thought of was Allen Iverson. Now it's not. And that's a terrible thing. People are saying AI, AI, AI. They're talking about artificial intelligence. So somewhere along the line, Allen Iverson has fallen through the cracks as a reference point. And I'm sad about that, Darren.
I always think the same thing. I really do. Every time I see AI, I think of Iverson.
You sound like that guy in Casino where they're meeting at Artie Toscano, the underboss of Kansas City.
Chubby,
Chubby. Yeah. No records, Artie. No records. What are you gonna do? Pay taxes? Yeah, Artie Toscano with us today. All right, that'll close down. That'll close down the Mike Missanelli podcast for today. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and that we're left with a really interesting situation with the Eagles. And it's amazing now where we are with this team. After last year, they go to the Super Bowl. We come into the season with all these high hopes. They go 10-1, and it ends with some lame press conference where the coach neuters himself just to keep his job. Oh. I'm Mike Missanelli. You've been listening to the Mike Missanelli podcast. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great weekend. We'll come at you next week. Thanks for listening, everybody. You can catch me via email, mike@mikemiss.com, or on Twitter @mikemiss25. Don't forget, if you want a Cameo shout-out, just go to cameo.com, put my name in there, and I'll give you a personal shout-out. I got a book out there, a children's book called The Adventures of Shima the Sheba. You might like it. Coming in the spring, I'm going to be at my winery a lot, Natalie Vineyards and Cape May Courthouse. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody on weekends at the winery. Keep all that in mind and have a great weekend. This is Mike Miss for Darren. I'm out. Take care, bye.